All right, so a few weeks ago, I got an email from Savage Industries, and that told me that Adam Savage was going to be building a replica of the hatch from the Apollo missions as a part of a celebration for the 50th anniversary of the moon landing at the Smithsonian. He was reaching out to makers from all over to assist in creating parts for the hatch, and I was assigned a part called the bottom left plate assembly. And here you'll see the hatch, and in the bottom left corner in the little red circle, that's the location of the part that I'm making. We were encouraged to get creative with our production methods, so I decided to take aluminum scrap, mainly melted down like cans and metal chips and things like that. And I decided to pour an ingot to machine my part out of. So to start out, I made a fire, and then I went to my scrap bin and I found these pieces of metal to make my makeshift cauldron out of. And I ground the rust off them, and then I welded the pieces together. And the next thing I had to do was make a mold. So I needed something to pour the aluminum into, so I cut some pieces of wood, and I used my nail gun to nail them together. And I made the cavity just slightly larger than the part was going to be. That way I could have a good-sized ingot for machining, and I had enough material to hold on to in the vise. Here's the aluminum scrap pieces that I used. Once the fire was good and hot, I dropped the scrap into the cauldron tube and I let it sit for a few minutes, and once I noticed that it was fully melted, I pulled the cauldron tube out of the fire, and then I poured the aluminum into my mold and let it cool for a few minutes. Once the ingot was cooled, I got it out of the mold and I put it in my mill, and I started rough cutting the edges into something a little more square and machinable. And once I had my ingot down into a good machinable block, I packed my stuff up and I headed to the Fab Lab at Lorain County Community College. Once I was there, I used a program called Aspire to design a file for CNC milling on their ShopBot. And here's the ShopBot starting to cut the part. And while it was rough cutting, I did some math here to calculate the step over for the particular angle that I needed for the part's finish pass to give it the roughly triangular shaped part on the top there. And here's the part when it was all done in the ShopBot. After that, I took it back home and I used a Sawzall to cut off the extra aluminum that I had left on the bottom to hang onto in the vise. And I flipped the part over and machined away what was left of the Sawzalling process, and I filed down the ridges on my triangular boss and any rough edges, and that gave me my finished part. And here it is.